I was called a thief by my daughter, accused of destroying her inheritance. I suffered in silence. What nobody expected was that I'd show the documents and change everything. But to understand how I got to this point, how a mother can be accused of the worst things by her own daughter, you need to hear this real story from the beginning. Because what happened in that country house in Asheville, North Carolina, wasn't just a confrontation. It was the end of decades of lies, silent sacrifices, and buried truths. And when everything came to light, nothing, absolutely nothing, went back to the way it was before. You know that moment when you realize you can't take it anymore? That you've reached the absolute limit of everything you can bear? Well, that's exactly what I felt when I saw my daughter walking through the door of that country house in Asheville. Rachel arrived with that posture of someone coming to collect something, you know? Hard eyes, firm steps, a folder under her arm like it was a weapon. I knew this wouldn't be a simple conversation between mother and daughter. It wasn't about resolving misunderstandings or trying to reconnect after being distant for so long. This was a scheduled execution, and I was the condemned. My heart tightened, but I took a deep breath. This real story needed to have an ending, one way or another. The first thing that came out of her mouth was an accusation. "You've always sabotaged my life, Mom." Just like that, no beating around the bush, no hi or how are you. Rachel didn't come looking for dialogue. She came to dump years of unresolved hurt. She started listing everything that, according to her, I had done wrong, from not supporting her choices to, get this, being responsible for her own father's death. Andrew Turner, my late husband, had become a saint in her head. A perfect man that I, the elderly mother and incompetent woman, never managed to honor. Every word that came out of that ungrateful daughter's mouth was like a stab, but I held firm. I wasn't going to crumble, not this time. Rachel sat on the edge of the sofa, opening the folder with rehearsed coldness. "You destroyed Grandma's inheritance, destroyed Dad's future, and now you're destroying my marriage," she fired off, pointing documents in my direction. According to her, David, her husband, couldn't prosper because of me. Yes, you read that right. The gold digger son-in-law's lack of ambition was somehow my responsibility. The logic, none. But when someone decides to turn you into the villain of their own story, logic doesn't matter anymore. She was there to humiliate me, to make me feel small, insignificant. And the worst part? She brought letterhead, digitized stamps, even spreadsheets. It was total humiliation. While she talked, gesturing with anger, I noticed something I'd never seen so clearly before. Rachel wasn't mad at me. She was mad at life. Mad for not being who she thought she should be. Mad because her father died too soon and left a void she could never fill. And the easiest solution? Put the blame on me. Turn the elderly mother into a scapegoat for all her frustrations. She kept talking, but the words started to blend together. Financial fraud, manipulation, emotional neglect. It was like she had memorized a script, rehearsed every line to destroy me completely. There was a moment when she paused, stared at me, and said, "Dad would never have done this to me." That hurt more than anything, because Andrew, the man she idolized, was precisely the one who had caused most of the problems we were facing. But how could I say that? How does a mother destroy the father's image in her daughter's head? I spent decades swallowing the truth, protecting his memory, and now I was paying the price. Rachel compared everything to me and him, and I always came out losing. In her version, Andrew was the perfect hero, and I was the incompetent villain who only got in the way. What scared me most in that confrontation wasn't her anger, but the coldness. She wasn't yelling, wasn't crying. She was calculating, methodical. Each accusation came with a paper, a date, a number. "Look here, Mom. You sold Grandma's farm in 1998 for a ridiculous amount. Where's that money?" She really believed I had stolen the family inheritance, that I, a woman who always worked to exhaustion, had hidden a fortune somewhere. The ungrateful daughter was so lost in her own narrative that she couldn't see reality. And the saddest part? She really thought she was right. I tried to explain, tried to speak, but Rachel cut me off at every attempt. "I don't want to hear your excuses, Mom. I want answers. I want to know why you lied all these years." Lied. That word echoed in the room like thunder. I, who always protected that girl, who always put her needs above mine, was being called a liar, a con artist, a thief from my own family. Tears threatened to come, but I held them back. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. Not this time. This emotional story was just beginning, and Rachel had no idea what she was about to discover. The tension in the room was almost palpable. The heavy air, the silence between accusations, her gaze locked on mine, as if trying to read me, decipher me, condemn me. Rachel was so convinced of her own version that she didn't even notice how much I'd changed. The fragile mother she knew, the one who always gave in, who always apologized even without guilt, wasn't there anymore. I had transformed. I had found strengths I didn't even know existed inside me. And when she finished talking, when she finally paused to breathe, I looked her in the eyes and said with a firmness that surprised even myself, "Sit down and listen, because now it's my turn to speak." Her expression changed for a fraction of a second, something between surprise and discomfort. Rachel expected to see me crumble, beg, ask for forgiveness for things I never did. But I was there, standing, firm, ready to finally reveal everything I had kept for so long. You know when you hold something heavy for years and finally decide to let go? It's liberating and scary at the same time. I knew that from that moment on, nothing would be the same again. That confrontation wasn't just about money or inheritance. It was about truth, about dignity, about finally looking that ungrateful daughter in the eyes and saying, "Enough." And believe me, what I was about to reveal was going to change everything. I took a deep breath and put my own folder on the table. Rachel frowned, confused. She didn't expect me to be prepared, didn't expect me to have proof, documents, truths kept for decades. But I did, and I was more than ready to show every single one of them. Because this emotional story wasn't about an elderly mother being destroyed by her daughter. It was about a woman who finally decided to defend herself. And when you decide to face the truth head on, there's no going back, none at all. When I opened my folder and started taking out the documents, I saw Rachel's face change. All that confidence, that prosecutor accusing the defendant posture, started to waver. She didn't expect me to have anything to show, much less a stack of papers organized chronologically, with every receipt, every proof, every evidence of what really happened. "You want to know about Grandma's farm?" I asked, looking directly into her eyes. "Then sit up straight and pay attention, because what I'm about to tell you is going to hurt a lot more than any accusation you threw at me. And believe me, this real story was about to take a turn that neither of us expected." I placed the first document on the table, the deed of sale for the farm in Lexington, Kentucky. Rachel picked up the paper with trembling hands, reading every line as if looking for some mistake, some loophole to continue accusing me. "Sold in 1998, exactly like you said," I began. "But you know why? Because your father, the wonderful Andrew Turner you idolized so much, had sunk our family into unpayable debts." She raised her eyes, shocked. "No, he wouldn't do that," she murmured. But I continued, relentless. I grabbed the second document, a list of creditors, names of friends, relatives, banks, investors, all wanting their money back, money that Andrew had promised to multiply and that simply evaporated. "Your father got into risky investments, Rachel, schemes he didn't understand, people he shouldn't have trusted. He bet everything, literally everything, thinking he'd get rich overnight." My voice was firm, but inside I felt immense pain. Speaking badly of Andrew, even after so long, still ate at me. But it was necessary. Rachel needed to know the truth. When he died, he left a mountain of debts. There was no life insurance payout, no inheritance, nothing but bills and more bills. And I, the elderly mother you despise so much, had to sell that entire farm so we wouldn't see our family being sued and publicly destroyed. Her eyes started to well up, but she still resisted. Still wanted to believe in the idealized version she had built. Then I showed the bank statements. Every penny from the farm sale documented, every payment to creditors recorded, every debt settled with stamped receipts. "Look here, Rachel. Look with your own eyes." Nothing was left. Zero. Nothing at all. And you know what I did after? I grabbed another envelope, this one heavier, full of papers yellowed by time. I worked like I'd never worked in my life. 2 jobs, Rachel. 2. I placed the pay stubs in front of her. One from the hospital, where I worked overnight as an administrative assistant, and another from the local market, where I was a cashier during the day. While you slept peacefully in your dorm at Boston University, I could barely sleep 3 hours a night. Rachel picked up the papers with hands shaking so much she almost dropped them. She read, reread, tried to process. But, Dad's insurance, she began, and I cut her off. It paid nothing, Rachel, absolutely nothing. The insurance was invalidated because your father was involved in irregular financial activities. They found loopholes in the contract and refused to pay. I tried to fight it in court, but didn't have money for expensive lawyers, so I swallowed hard and went to work. Every word I said was like ripping a piece of myself out, but it was liberating too. Finally, after so long, that ungrateful daughter was going to hear the complete truth. I grabbed another document, proof of payment for her university. Every tuition payment, every fee, every book. Boston University isn't cheap, Rachel, and you studied there for 4 whole years. You know how much I paid? Look here. I showed the amounts, one by one. She went pale. That's a lot of money, Mom. And I responded with a calm I didn't even know I had. It is. And every penny came from my sweat, from my early mornings cleaning hospital corridors, from my afternoons scanning groceries at the market. I didn't sleep right for years, Rachel, years, so that you could have the education you deserved, so you wouldn't feel the weight of your father's wrong choices. Tears finally started rolling down her face, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. You want to know why I never told you all this? I asked, and my voice finally trembled. Because I didn't want you to grow up hating your father, didn't want you to carry the weight of his failures. I thought I was protecting you, Rachel. I thought that if I kept everything to myself, you could have a lighter, happier life. I paused, wiping my own tears that insisted on falling. But tell me something, was it worth it? Because look where we are now. You accusing me of stealing, of lying, of destroying your life, while I just tried to save what was left after your father destroyed everything. This emotional story was turning inside out, and Rachel was beginning to realize she'd messed up badly, really badly. She was silent, looking at the documents spread on the table as if they were pieces of a puzzle that was finally starting to make sense. But the penny still hadn't completely dropped. Rachel was still trying to find a way to justify her own accusations, to cling to the narrative she had built over the years. But why didn't you ever tell me? She asked, her voice weak, almost childlike. And I answered with all the honesty I could muster. Because I loved you too much to hurt you. Because I thought protecting you was more important than defending myself. And because I was afraid you'd hate me even more if you knew the truth. The air grew heavy between us. The elderly mother she despised had just revealed a sacrifice that lasted decades. Rachel looked at her own hands, then at the documents, then at me. She was crumbling, but still hadn't hit rock bottom. There were still things she didn't know, things that would shake the structures of the reality she had invented even more. I knew the next blow would be even harder, and honestly, she needed to hear it. She needed to understand that all that total humiliation she tried to impose on me was based on lies she herself created, lies that were about to completely collapse. And when that happened, nothing would be the same again, nothing at all. I slowly put away the documents, each movement calculated, letting the weight of those revelations fill the silence. Rachel remained seated, absorbing, processing. I could see the internal struggle happening inside her, accept that she was wrong or continue clinging to the comfortable version she had created. But truth is relentless. It doesn't ask for permission, doesn't wait for the right moment. It simply exists, naked and raw, waiting to be acknowledged. And in that moment, between mother and daughter, between accusations and revelations, the truth was there, pulsing in the air like a broken heart that finally decides to stop bleeding in silence. Rachel stayed silent for a few minutes that felt like hours. I could see the conflict happening inside her, as if every piece of information she had just received was battling against years of a constructed narrative. She had always lived trying to overcome her father's shadow. Andrew Turner was the impossible standard, the perfect man she could never match, and that I, in her view, could never honor. But the truth is that charming, enchanting man who made everyone laugh at family parties was also deeply irresponsible with money. And I contributed to that perfect image by hiding every mistake of his, every disastrous decision, every broken promise. I thought I was protecting our daughter. In reality, I was creating a ghost that would haunt us forever. You never understood what Dad represented, Rachel finally spoke. Her voice choked. He was special, Mom. He had dreams, had ambition. He wasn't like you, who always settled for so little. Those words hurt, but didn't surprise me. I knew she thought that way. For that ungrateful daughter, I was the mediocre, small, boring version. Andrew was the dreamer, the visionary. She never realized that dreams without responsibility are just dangerous fantasies. Rachel, your father was special, yes, but he was also human, and he made mistakes, serious mistakes that almost destroyed everything. She shook her head, refusing to accept. You always diminished him. Always. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of decades of silence. I didn't diminish him, Rachel. I protected him. I protected his memory for you. But it's time for you to know who he really was. I got up and went to the cabinet, from where I took out another folder. This one was older, more worn. Rachel looked at me with a mixture of fear and curiosity. What's that? She asked. It's the complete truth, I replied. The truth I hid because I thought you were too young, too fragile. But now you're a grown woman who accused me of the worst crimes, so you deserve to know everything. I placed the folder on the table, but before opening it, I needed to say something. I needed her to understand the magnitude of what she was about to discover. Your father didn't die in a common accident, Rachel. It wasn't just bad luck or fate, it was consequence. She widened her eyes. What are you talking about? I opened the folder and took out the first document, police investigation reports. Andrew was running from creditors that day, very dangerous people he had scammed in investment schemes. He bet several families' money on illegal businesses, promising 500%, 700% returns. Obviously, it was all a lie, a pyramid scheme in disguise. Rachel went pale. No, he wouldn't do that. Dad wasn't a criminal. And I, with all the pain in the world, responded, he wasn't evil, Rachel, but he was desperate. And desperate men make terrible choices. This real story was getting darker and darker, and I knew the worst was still to come. I showed her the names of the people Andrew had scammed, longtime friends, distant cousins, even neighbors from our street. He promised everyone he'd multiply their money, that he had a unique opportunity, a foolproof deal. And people believed him because it was Andrew. Charming, convincing, always with a smile on his face. Rachel read the names with tears streaming down. She knew some of those people, had grown up playing with their children. Why did he do it? She asked, her voice broken. Because he wanted to be important, Rachel. Wanted to prove he was more than a common salesman. Wanted to be the man who would transform our lives. But he chose the wrong path. And when everything collapsed, he didn't have the courage to face the consequences. I grabbed another document. This one I had held back last because I knew the impact it would have. It was the toxicology report from Andrew's autopsy. Rachel looked at the paper without understanding what it was. What's this? I took a deep breath, preparing to destroy her last illusion. It's your father's blood test from the day of the accident. He was extremely intoxicated, Rachel, 3 times above the legal limit, and there were traces of medications that weren't prescribed to him. She dropped the paper as if it burned. No, it can't be true. But it was. And I had kept that for 25 years, protecting the image of a man who, in the end, had chosen to run instead of fight. This elderly mother she despised so much had carried that secret alone so she could grow up loving her father. He was running that day, Rachel. Running from debts, from creditors, from threats. And he was drunk, completely drunk. My voice failed, and the tears I had held finally came. I found empty bottles in his car when I went to the junkyard to identify the belongings. I found farewell notes he didn't even have the courage to send. Your father was broken, Rachel. Financially and emotionally broken. And I hid all of that from you because you were 15 years old. 15 years old and had just lost your father. How was I going to tell you he was drunk? That he was running? That he had destroyed so many people's lives? Rachel was sobbing now, her whole body shaking. All that structure she had built, all that narrative of perfect father and imperfect mother, was collapsing. I sat next to her, and for the first time in years, I touched her arm. I'm not telling you this to destroy his memory, Rachel. I'm telling you because you need to understand that life isn't black and white. Your father wasn't a monster, but he also wasn't a saint. He was human, flawed, and made terrible decisions that affected all of us. And I spent the last 25 years paying for those decisions, while you blamed me for not being the perfect woman he never was either. I looked into her eyes, finally seeing the penny drop. You spent your whole life trying to live up to a version of him that never existed. And you punished me for not being able to compete with a ghost. That ungrateful daughter was finally understanding the magnitude of what she had done. But it still wasn't over. I had one more bomb to drop. I grabbed Rachel's folder, the one she had brought with accusations of fraud, and opened it. Now let's talk about your accusations against me. My voice changed tone. It got colder, firmer. You came here accusing me of stealing inheritance, of committing fraud, of destroying your life. But you know what I discovered, Rachel? I took out documents from my own investigation. She widened her eyes. You forged my signature. You opened credit lines at Bank of America in my name. And you illegally sold this Asheville house, which was registered in my name. The silence that followed was deafening. Rachel went completely pale, and I saw panic take over her face. She thought she'd never be discovered, thought the elderly mother was too dumb, too naive, too weak to investigate. But she was wrong. Very wrong. I placed the documents in front of her, one by one. Bank forms with clearly forged signatures, fraudulent powers of attorney registered in the county, suspicious bank movements transferring money from my account to hers. You didn't just accuse me of crimes I never committed, Rachel. You committed crimes against me. She tried to speak but couldn't. Her voice wouldn't come out. And you know what else? I have recordings of clerk attendants confirming that you lied about my mental health to approve transactions. You said I was senile, incapable of managing my own assets. I looked deep into the eyes of that woman I had raised, loved, protected. Who's the criminal here, Rachel? Who really destroyed the family? The total humiliation she wanted to impose on me was turning against her. And this was just the beginning. Rachel was paralyzed, her face completely white, eyes fixed on the documents scattered on the table as if she were seeing a nightmare materializing in front of her. She opened her mouth a few times, trying to find words, anything she could use as a defense. But nothing came out. I continued relentlessly. You thought I'd never find out, didn't you? Thought the elderly mother was too dumb, too inattentive, too busy to notice she was being robbed by her own daughter. My voice was firm, but inside my heart was shattered into 1,000 pieces. How did we get to this point? How did the little girl I held in my arms turn into this person capable of destroying me financially and emotionally? But this wasn't the time to weaken. It was time for justice. That's when I heard the sound of a car pulling up at the entrance. Rachel heard it too, and her face, which was already pale, went even whiter. She knew who was arriving, or at least suspected. The door opened, and Khalil Hassan, my husband, entered the room accompanied by a man in an impeccable suit carrying a leather briefcase. Rachel, Khalil greeted coldly, with that Lebanese accent he still carried even after so many years in the United States. This is Dr. Marcus Rassan, attorney specializing in estate fraud, straight from New York. Rachel swallowed hard. She finally understood she wasn't dealing with a fragile, lonely mother. She was dealing with a woman who had prepared for this confrontation, and that ungrateful daughter was about to discover that her actions had real consequences. Dr. Rassan sat down, opened his briefcase with surgical precision, and began to speak. His voice was calm, almost monotone, but each word fell like a hammer. Mrs. Turner Miller, the evidence we have against you is substantial and incontestable. We have bank forms digitally signed in your mother's name, Helen Turner Hassan, which we can prove through forensic analysis were not signed by her. Rachel tried to interrupt, but he raised his hand. Please, let me finish. We also have false powers of attorney registered in Buncombe County, documents you presented claiming your mother was mentally incapacitated, which we know to be completely false, and we have recordings. He paused, letting the word weigh in the air. Recordings of courthouse employees confirming that you provided false information about your mother's health status. Khalil approached and placed a tablet on the table, pressed play. Rachel's voice echoed through the room. My mother has advanced Alzheimer's. She doesn't recognize anyone anymore. I need this power of attorney to manage her assets before it's too late. The recording continued with the attendant asking about medical reports, and Rachel responding that she would bring them later, but that the situation was urgent. When the recording ended, the silence was deafening. Rachel had her hands shaking, tears streaming down her face. I didn't mean to. It was David who... She started trying to throw blame on the gold digger son-in-law, but Dr. Rasan cut her off. "Mrs. Turner Miller, anything you say can and will be used against you. I suggest you consult an attorney before continuing to speak." This real story was taking a turn no one expected, and Rachel finally realized the seriousness of the situation. Dr. Rasan continued, methodical. "We also have evidence that you illegally sold the Asheville property, valued at approximately $680,000, without the knowledge or consent of the legitimate owner, your mother. The sale documents were processed with a fraudulent power of attorney, which constitutes not only document forgery, but also unlawful appropriation of real estate." He turned a page. "Additionally, we identified 3 credit lines opened at Bank of America in Helen Turner Hassan's name, totaling $127,000 in accumulated debt. The digital signatures were traced to your IP address, Mrs. Turner Miller, your home in Charlotte." Rachel was sobbing now, but he showed no emotion. "According to North Carolina state laws, these crimes can result in up to 12 years in prison. And that's just a conservative estimate." Khalil finally spoke, his voice deep and controlled. "Rachel, when I met your mother, she was broken. Financially and emotionally broken. And you know why? Because of you. Because of the debts you created in her name, the frauds you committed, the total humiliation you put her through." He leaned forward, eyes fixed on her. "Your mother worked her entire life to give you the best. She sacrificed her own health, her sleep, her peace. And how did you repay her? By stealing from her, lying about her, trying to destroy her completely." Every word that came out of his mouth was true, and Rachel knew it. There was no way to deny it, no way to escape. The evidence was there, organized, dated, irrefutable. The elderly mother she despised so much had done her homework, and had done it very well. Dr. Rasan continued presenting document after document. Bank statements showing suspicious transfers, emails between Rachel and David discussing how to solve the mother problem, text messages where she planned to sell the house before the old lady notices. Each piece of evidence was a stab, not at me, but at her. I watched Rachel crumbling, and even with all the anger, all the pain, I couldn't feel satisfaction. I felt pity for the woman my daughter had become. But pity doesn't change facts. And the facts were clear. That ungrateful daughter had committed serious crimes against her own mother, and now she'd have to answer for them. This emotional story was far from over, but at least the truth was finally coming to light. We also have statements from 3 of your neighbors in Charlotte who confirm hearing arguments between you and David about getting money from the old lady before she marries that foreigner. Dr. Rasan didn't even look at Khalil when mentioning this, maintaining professionalism. These statements corroborate our thesis of premeditation and intent. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was planned, executed, and concealed for months. Rachel buried her face in her hands. "Please, please, Mom. I didn't know it had gotten to this point. David said it was just a temporary loan, that you wouldn't even notice." Loan. She called theft a loan. And she was still trying to minimize it, throwing blame on her husband, on the gold digger son-in-law who conveniently wasn't there to defend himself. Khalil grabbed another document. "And about David Miller, he's being sought right now. We discovered he also has a history of financial fraud in 2 other states. He used you, Rachel, just like you used your mother." That seemed to break her last resistance. Rachel started crying convulsively, her whole body shaking. I didn't want it to come to this. We just needed money. David's business had gone bankrupt and..." Excuses. Always excuses. But excuses don't pay debts, don't erase crimes, don't rebuild trust, and definitely don't return the years of peace she stole from me. The elderly mother was there, firm, watching her daughter finally face the consequences of her choices. Dr. Rasan closed his briefcase. "Mrs. Turner Miller, I'm going to be direct with you. Your case is extremely serious. The district attorney has enough elements for an almost certain conviction. However," he paused, looking at me, "your mother asked me to offer an alternative." Rachel raised her face, eyes swollen and red, a thread of hope emerging. What alternative? Khalil and I exchanged a look. It was the moment to define not just her future, but ours too. The moment to decide between criminal justice or family justice, between revenge or redemption. And honestly, Neither option was easy. Neither option would bring back what was lost, but at least one of them offered a possibility, however small, of reconstruction. And it was about that possibility we needed to talk about now. I got up from the chair slowly, feeling the weight of everything I was about to do. Rachel looked at me with that mixture of fear, shame, and a fragile hope I could almost touch. I went to the old cabinet in the corner of the room, the one that kept the most important things from our family, and took out a thick folder, yellowed by time. It was 25 years. 25 years keeping that, protecting a truth I always knew I'd need to reveal someday. But I never imagined it would be like this, in these circumstances, with my own daughter sitting in front of me not as a victim, but as a criminal. I came back and placed the folder on the table right in front of her. Before we talk about your future, Rachel, you need to see this. You need to understand once and for all who your father really was. This real story was about to reveal its most painful secret. Rachel looked at the folder with apprehension, as if she knew what was inside would change everything forever. And it would. I opened it slowly, and the first thing I took out were receipts. Hundreds of them. These are proof of payment for your college, Rachel. Boston University, 1999 to 2003. Every tuition payment, every enrollment fee, every textbook. She picked up some with still trembling hands. Look at the dates, look at the times. Many of these payments were made at 5 in the morning, before I started my hospital shift, because that was the only free time I had to go to the bank. My voice faltered a bit, but I continued. You see these amounts? This here is almost an entire month's salary, and I paid this every month religiously while surviving on the bare minimum. That ungrateful daughter was finally seeing the sacrifice with her own eyes. I continued taking out documents, proof of the farm sale, receipts of payments to creditors, collection letters addressed to Andrew Turner. Here's everything your father left behind, Rachel. Every debt, every broken promise, every person he deceived. She read in silence, tears falling on the old papers. She saw the names of people she knew, families that had been destroyed by her father's decisions. And here, I grabbed another pile, are documents from my attempts to recover the life insurance. 5 different lawyers, Rachel. 5. They all said the same thing. There was no way to win. The insurance company had proof that Andrew was involved in fraudulent activities. The contract was voided. I looked deep into her eyes. So no, Rachel. The insurance didn't pay anything, nothing at all. And I never told you because you had just lost your father. How was I going to destroy his image too? I reached the bottom of the folder. My hand trembled as I grabbed the last document. It was the sealed envelope I had kept for so long, swearing I'd only open it if absolutely necessary. And now it was. I took a deep breath and handed it to Rachel. Open it. She looked at me, confused. What's this? My voice came out firm, but my heart was shattered. It's the complete autopsy report of your father. The complete version, not the summarized version they showed you at the funeral. Rachel hesitated. Her hands stopped on the envelope. Mom, I don't know if I want to. And I interrupted her. You need to, Rachel. You accused this elderly mother of everything terrible. You called me a thief, a liar, a life destroyer. So now you're going to read and you're going to understand who really destroyed our family. This emotional story was reaching its most painful point. Rachel opened the envelope with trembling hands and began to read. I saw the exact moment when she reached the toxicology exam part. Her face went completely pale. Blood alcohol level 0.24, 3 times above the legal limit. She continued reading, her voice increasingly weak. Presence of non-prescribed benzodiazepines, signs of chronic alcohol use, compromised liver. She dropped the paper as if it burned. No, it can't be. Dad didn't drink that much. He just had a drink now and then. And I, with all the pain I kept for decades, responded, he drank, Rachel. He drank a lot, especially in the last months. I hid the bottles from you, cleaned up the mess before you woke up, made excuses when he missed work. I did everything so you wouldn't see, so you wouldn't suffer. I continued, because she needed to hear everything. On the day of the accident, your father was running, literally running. He had received threats from a group of investors he had deceived. Dangerous people, Rachel. People who didn't accept excuses. I grabbed another document from the folder. This is the complete police report. They found in your father's car a suitcase with clothes, $3,800 in cash, and 3 empty whiskey bottles. I handed her the paper. He was planning to run and leave us behind, leave you and me dealing with all the mess he created, and he was too drunk to drive safely. That's why he lost control on the curve. Rachel was sobbing now, her whole body shaking. The perfect father, the hero she idolized her whole life, was crumbling right in front of her. I sat next to her, and for the first time let my own tears fall freely. I found notes in the car, Rachel. Notes he wrote, but never had the courage to send. One of them was for you. I took out the crumpled, yellowed paper with Andrew's shaky handwriting. Rachel took it with reverence, as if it were a sacred relic, and in a way, it was. My princess, I'm sorry for not being the father you deserved. I'm sorry for failing. Take care of your mother. She's stronger than you imagine. She's stronger than I ever was. Rachel read aloud, her voice breaking with every word. When she finished, she looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. It was as if finally, after so many years, she was really seeing me. Why didn't you ever show me this? She asked, pressing the note against her chest. Why did you hide all of this from me? I took a deep breath. Because you were 15 years old, Rachel. 15 years old and had just lost your father in a horrible accident. How was I going to tell you he was drunk? That he was running? That he would have abandoned us if he had survived? How was I going to put that weight on your shoulders? I wiped the tears from my face. So I kept everything. I sold the farm in silence, paid his debts in silence, worked to exhaustion in silence, and I let you grow up believing your father was a hero. Because at least that illusion I could give you, that ungrateful daughter, was finally understanding the magnitude of the sacrifice I made, finally seeing the complete truth. Rachel stayed silent for a long time, just looking at the documents spread on the table. The farm sold, debts paid, college receipts, autopsy report, father's note, the entire history of our family exposed, raw and painful. I spent my whole life hating you, she finally whispered. I spent my whole life blaming you for not being like Dad, for being weak, for being unambitious, for settling for so little. But the truth is that, she paused, swallowing a sob. The truth is that you were the only one who stayed, the only one who fought, the only one who really loved me enough to carry all that weight alone. It was the first time in decades I heard something resembling recognition coming from her mouth, and it hurt as much as the hate had hurt. Khalil and Dr. Rasan remained silent during this entire revelation, respecting the moment between mother and daughter, but I knew we still had to return to reality. Rachel had committed serious crimes. She had robbed me, lied, forged documents. And knowing the truth about her father didn't erase that, didn't justify her actions, but at least now she understood where her anger came from, her resentment. She understood she had spent years fighting against the shadow of a man who never existed the way she imagined, and that she had punished the only person who really sacrificed herself for her, the elderly mother she despised so much. It was a moment of cruel but necessary truth, and what would come next would be even more difficult. Because now, with all cards on the table, Rachel would have to decide who she really wanted to be. The silence that followed was different from all the others. It wasn't that heavy silence of anger or unspoken accusations. It was a silence of processing, of painful acceptance of reality. Rachel was destroyed, and I could see in her eyes that something had finally broken. She wasn't the arrogant daughter who had arrived here hours ago, full of accusations and certainties. She was a woman confronting the complete collapse of everything she believed to be true. But I couldn't afford to soften now. Not after everything. Not after years of being treated like the villain of the story. I took a deep breath and looked at Khalil, who nodded. It was time to put the cards on the table. It was time for the ultimatum. This real story was about to take a definitive turn. Rachel, I began, my voice firm but not cruel. Now you know the truth. About your father, about me, about everything that happened. But that doesn't change the fact that you committed serious crimes against me. You robbed me, lied about me, forged my signature, tried to declare me incapable. These are federal and state crimes. She lowered her head, unable to face me. And I have a decision to make now. A decision that will determine not just your future, but our future as mother and daughter, if we even still have a future together. I saw her shrink with my words, but I continued. I needed to make everything clear. There could be no ambiguity. There could be no room for her to later say she didn't understand or didn't know what was at stake. That ungrateful daughter needed to face the consequences head-on. Dr. Rosson leaned forward, resuming his professional tone. Mrs. Turner-Miller, legally speaking, we have enough evidence to prosecute you criminally. You could face up to 12 years in prison, plus substantial fines and the obligation to return all stolen amounts with interest and monetary correction. Rachel closed her eyes, tears still streaming. However, he continued, your mother, against my initial recommendation, is willing to offer an alternative, but this alternative comes with extremely rigid and non-negotiable conditions. If you break any of them, even minimally, criminal proceedings will be immediately instituted. There will be no second chance. He paused, letting the weight of that settle. Do you understand? Rachel nodded, her voice gone. Yes, I understand. I stood up and stood in front of her. I needed her to look me in the eyes while I said this. First condition, you're going to return every penny you stole from me. Every single penny. This includes the $127,000 from fraudulent credit lines, plus the $680,000 from the illegal house sale, plus all accumulated interest, bank penalties, and legal costs I had to pay to clean up the mess you created. That's approximately $890,000. Rachel gasped. It was an astronomical amount. I don't have all that money, Mom. And I replied coldly. Then you're going to work to get it. You're going to sell everything you have. You're going to get 2-3 jobs if necessary. You're going to do exactly what I did when your father left us drowning in debt. You have 2 years to pay everything, with minimum monthly installments that Dr. Rassan will stipulate. If you're late on a single payment, the deal ends. This elderly mother was no longer willing to make things easy, not for an ungrateful daughter who almost destroyed her. Second condition, I continued, my voice gaining more firmness. You're going to regularize all frauds committed. You're going to Bank of America, take responsibility for the fraudulent credit lines, and transfer all debt to your name. You're going to the courthouse and rectify all false powers of attorney. You're going to clean my name from every lie you spread. Rachel was sobbing softly, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. Third, you're going to write a formal letter of apology. Not a quick message. Not a, sorry, Mom. A real letter, taking complete responsibility for everything you did, without throwing blame on David, without playing victim, without flimsy excuses. And you're going to read that letter to me personally. I saw her tremble with that. Reading aloud would mean facing every word, every admission of guilt. It would mean total humiliation, but a deserved humiliation this time. Khalil approached and put his hand on my shoulder, giving me strength. Fourth condition, he said with his deep voice. You're going to submit to psychological counseling. Weekly therapy, mandatory, with a professional will indicate. And he'll send us monthly reports about your progress. Because, Rachel, you're not well. And if you really want any chance of rebuilding your relationship with your mother, you need to work on yourself. You need to understand why you did what you did and ensure you'll never repeat it. Rachel looked at him with a mixture of shame and surprise. She didn't expect the gold-digger son-in-law she criticized so much would be precisely the one protecting me now, or that foreigner she viewed with contempt was more family to me than she had been in years. The irony was almost tangible in the air. And the fifth condition, I said, and this was the hardest for me, is that you understand that even doing all of this, our relationship might not survive. Rachel raised her face abruptly, eyes wide. What? I crouched in front of her, getting at eye level. Rachel, you broke my trust in a way that might not be fixable. You accused me of the worst things, robbed me, lied about me, tried to declare me incapable. That doesn't get erased with money or apologies. So you need to understand that even if you fulfill all these conditions perfectly, I might simply not be able to forgive you completely. I might not be able to look at you the same way ever again, and you have to accept that. Her tears fell harder. But you're my mother. And I responded, my voice choked, and you're my daughter. But even a mother's love has limits, Rachel, and you crossed mine. Dr. Rosson took a document from his briefcase. Mrs. Turner-Miller, here's the formal agreement with all these conditions detailed. You have 72 hours to decide whether you'll accept or not. If you accept, you sign and start complying immediately. If you refuse or let the deadline pass, we'll institute criminal proceedings automatically. There's no negotiation, no middle ground. It's all or nothing. He placed the document on the table along with a pen. And to make it absolutely clear, this agreement doesn't exempt you from criminal liability if you break any of the conditions. It only suspends proceedings while you comply with what was agreed. It's a unique chance to do the right thing without ending up in prison. I suggest you think very carefully. Rachel looked at the document as if it were a death sentence. And in a way, it was. It was the end of the comfortable life she had built at my expense. 72 hours, Rachel, I repeated, standing up again. 3 days for you to decide if you want to try to fix what you did or if you prefer to face criminal justice. And just so there's no doubt, David is also being investigated. So, if you're thinking about running away with him or convincing him to help you, forget it. He's probably already in another state trying to save his own skin. I saw the impact of that on her face. She really didn't know. Really thought the gold digger's son-in-law would be by her side at this time. How naive. Or would it be foolishness? Rats flee the ship before it sinks. And David Miller was the type of rat that leaves everyone behind without looking back. This emotional story was showing Rachel she had allied herself with the wrong people and attacked the right ones. You can go now, I said, pointing to the door. Take the document, read it carefully, and give me an answer in 3 days. If you don't respond, I'll consider it a refusal and the lawyers will take appropriate measures. Rachel stood up stumbling, grabbed the document with trembling hands. She looked at me, at Khalil, at Dr. Rassan, as if expecting someone to say it was a joke, that it wasn't that serious, but everyone remained silent, serious, unwavering. Mom, she started, but I raised my hand. Not now, Rachel. Now you're going home. You're going to sit alone with your thoughts, and you're going to decide what kind of person you want to be. The one who takes responsibility, or the one who runs from them like your father did. The choice is yours. And without more words, she left through the door, looking 10 years older than when she arrived. When the door closed, my legs finally failed. Khalil caught me before I fell, helping me sit on the sofa. The tears I had held during that entire confrontation finally came in waves. Did I do the right thing? I asked, my voice small and broken. Khalil hugged me tight. You did the only thing you could do, Helen. You defended yourself. You set boundaries. You showed you have dignity and won't be trampled on anymore. That's not cruelty. It's survival. Dr. Rassan put away his documents in silence, respecting our moment. Before leaving, he turned and said, Mrs. Hassan, in 30 years of career, I've seen many cases of family fraud. And I can tell you one thing. You were more generous with your daughter than 99% of victims would be. She has a chance most wouldn't have. What she'll do with that chance? Well, only time will tell. And with those words, he left, leaving Khalil and me alone in the heavy silence of that house that held so many memories, so much pain, so many secrets finally revealed. The days that followed were strange, a mixture of relief and anguish I'd never experienced before. Relief for finally having put everything out there, for having defended myself, for having shown I was no longer that fragile and manipulable elderly mother. But anguish, too, because deep down, no matter how much Rachel had hurt me, she was still my daughter, and a part of me, however small, still hoped she'd do the right thing. Khalil noticed my state. He always noticed. In the 2 years we'd been together, he had learned to read my silences, my pauses, the moments when I got lost in my own thoughts. And that night, while I looked through the window of the Asheville house, seeing the moon reflected in the mountains, he approached with 2 cups of tea. You need to talk? He asked with that accent I had learned to love. And I, without taking my eyes off the landscape, replied, I need to understand if I did the right thing. Khalil sat next to me, placing the cup in my hands. Helen, you gave her a chance she didn't deserve. You know that, don't you? I nodded, but tears insisted on falling. She's my daughter, Khalil. I know she hurt me, that she robbed me, that she tried to destroy me, but she's still my daughter. And I can't just turn that off. He stayed silent for a moment, and then said something that caught me completely off guard. I understand what you're feeling, more than you imagine. I looked at him, confused. What do you mean? Khalil took a deep breath, and I noticed there was something heavy in that sigh, something he'd been keeping for a while. There's something I need to tell you, Helen. Something about us, about how this marriage started. My heart tightened. This emotional story was about to gain another layer of complexity. He stood up and went to the window, standing with his back to me as if it were easier to talk without facing me. When I met you 2 years ago, I was in a difficult situation. My son, Richard Hassan, was trying to have me declared legally incapable to take control of my fortune and the family businesses. I knew Khalil had a son from a previous marriage, but he rarely talked about it. Richard has always been ambitious, and when my health had some minor problems, he saw an opportunity. He started gathering evidence that I was senile, incapable of managing my own assets. I felt a knot in my stomach. That reminded me too much of what Rachel had done to me. He hired lawyers, doctors willing to falsify reports, even started spreading rumors in business circles that I was losing my mind. His voice was loaded with pain. My own son, Helen, just like your own daughter did to you. Khalil turned to face me, and I saw tears in his eyes for the first time since we'd met. When we got married, I needed that. I needed to prove I was lucid, autonomous, capable of making my own decisions. A man who can get married, who chooses a partner, who builds a new life, isn't an incapable man. That's what my lawyers argued, and it worked. Richard lost the case. He paused, wiping his eyes. So, yes, Helen, our marriage started out of interest, mutual interest. You needed financial stability after everything Rachel had done, and I needed to prove my mental sanity. It was an agreement that benefited us both. I felt as if the floor had disappeared from under my feet. That man I had learned to trust, who had helped me face Rachel, also had his own hidden motives. Was I just a tool? A means to an end? He must have seen the pain on my face because he quickly knelt in front of me, holding my hands. But Helen, please, listen to me until the end. Yes, the marriage started that way. But what happened after? What happened between us? That was real. Completely real. I wanted to believe, wanted so much, but the words wouldn't come. I just looked at him, waiting for him to continue. At first, it was just an agreement on paper, 2 strangers signing documents to solve legal problems. But then, I started to really get to know you, started to see your strength, your dignity, the way you carried your pain without losing your kindness. And I fell in love, Helen, for real. Not for convenience, not for the agreement, for you, for the woman you are. That ungrateful daughter wasn't the only one making me question everything. Now it was my own husband. Did anyone really care about me, or was I just useful for solving problems? I got up from the sofa, moving away from him. I needed space to think, to process. So everything was a lie from the beginning? You sought me out because you needed a paper wife? I was just convenient? My voice was breaking, but I held myself together. I wasn't going to crumble. Not again. Khalil stood up too, his expression desperate. At first, yes, I won't lie about that. But Helen, things changed. I changed. You changed too. What started as an agreement transformed into something real. I truly love you. And I know you feel something for me too, even if it's not the same intensity. He was right. I felt something. But now everything was confused, mixed with the feeling of having been used. Again, always being used by someone. By the ungrateful daughter, now by the gold-digger son-in-law. No, wait, Khalil wasn't a son-in-law. He was my husband. But was he really? Or was it just a signed paper? You should have told me, I said, my voice gaining firmness. You should have been honest with me from the beginning. I deserved to know. Khalil nodded, accepting the accusation. You're right, completely right. And I wanted to have told you before, but I was afraid. Afraid you'd reject me, that you'd distance yourself, that I'd lose the only good thing that happened in my life in years. He took a step in my direction, but didn't try to touch me. I'm telling you now because I saw what you went through with Rachel. I saw you being strong enough to demand honesty, to not accept more lies. And I realized that if I really love you, I need to give you the same honesty, even if it means losing you. Those words caught me off guard. He was willing to risk everything for the truth, just like I had done with Rachel. Didn't that mean something? I sat back on the sofa, my head spinning. So what are you asking me, Khalil? That I pretend everything's okay? That I ignore the fact our marriage started as a farce? He shook his head. No, I'm asking for a chance to start over. A chance to build something true, without lies, without hidden interests. I'm asking you to give me the same chance you're giving Rachel, the chance to prove I can be better than I was. That made me pause. It was true. I was giving Rachel an opportunity to redeem herself, to fix what she had done. Would it be fair to deny that to Khalil, who at least had the courage to tell me the truth before I discovered it another way? This real story was forcing me to make decisions I never imagined I'd have to make. This elderly mother was learning that life is full of shades of gray, not just black and white. I need time, I finally said, looking at him. I need to process all of this, understand what I feel, what I want. You surprised me, Khalil, and not in a good way. He nodded, accepting. I understand, and I'll give you all the time you need. Just don't expel me from your life completely, please. There was genuine vulnerability in him at that moment. He wasn't the successful businessman, the self-assured man. He was just a man scared of losing someone important. And I, despite the pain, despite the confusion, still felt something for him. I'm not going to expel you, I replied, but I'm also not going to pretend everything's okay. We need to rebuild trust from scratch. If you're willing to do that, then we can try. I saw relief take over his face. I'm willing, completely willing. We spent the rest of the night in silence, each immersed in our own thoughts. Two strangers who married for convenience and now needed to decide if they wanted to build something real. It was scary and liberating at the same time. Scary because it meant vulnerability, risk, the possibility of being hurt again. But liberating because, for the first time, everything was open. No secrets, no lies. It was a blank page waiting to be filled. And I, that elderly mother who had spent decades keeping secrets to protect other people, finally had the chance to live something true. But the question that wouldn't go away was I brave enough for that? After everything I'd lived, after all the pain and betrayal, could I still believe in new beginnings? Or was I just preparing myself for another disappointment? Time would tell. And those 72 hours I gave Rachel would also be 72 hours for me to decide about my own future. 48 hours passed in agonizing silence. No call, no message, no sign from Rachel. Part of me started to believe she had chosen to run, just like her father had tried to do so many years ago. That ungrateful daughter would rather disappear than face the consequences of her own acts. The other part, that maternal part I tried so hard to suffocate, but that insisted on existing, hoped she was just processing everything, gathering courage to do the right thing. Khalil respected my space during those days. He slept in the guest room, talked only when necessary, but I could feel the worried looks he threw at me when he thought I wasn't looking. This emotional story was consuming me from the inside, and every hour that passed without Rachel's response was like slow torture. It was on the third day, with only 6 hours left until the final deadline, that my phone finally rang. The number was unknown, but something inside me knew who it was. I answered with trembling hands. Hello? The voice that came from the other side was almost unrecognizable. Weak, hoarse, broken. Mom, it's me, Rachel. She was crying, sobbing between words. I need to see you, in person, please. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of that request. Where are you? There was a long pause. At a hotel in Charlotte, Hotel Meridian, room 237. David, he ran away, Mom. As soon as he heard about the investigation, he got in the car and left. Didn't even say goodbye. Just left a note saying I was on my own now. Her voice broke completely. He left me alone to face everything. Just like Dad would have done. That broke my heart. She had finally seen the truth about the gold digger son-in-law, too. I'm coming there, I said, surprising myself. Khalil, who had heard the conversation from the next room, appeared at the door, worried. Are you sure? He asked quietly. I nodded. I need to do this. I need to look her in the eyes. He understood and offered to go with me, but I declined. That was something between mother and daughter, something that needed to be resolved just by us two. The trip from Asheville to Charlotte took almost 2 hours, 2 hours in which my mind didn't stop for a second. I replayed every moment of the confrontation, every revelation, every tear. I tried to prepare myself for what would come next. But how do you prepare for something like this? How do you prepare to look at your own daughter who betrayed you in every possible way and decide if there's still something to save? This elderly mother didn't have the answers, just a broken heart trying to stay whole for one more day. When I arrived at Hotel Meridian, it was starting to get dark. The place was simple, nowhere near the type of accommodation Rachel used to choose. She who always wanted the best, the most expensive, the most luxurious. But now she was there, at a roadside hotel, alone and destroyed. I went up to room 237, and before knocking on the door, I took a deep breath. I didn't know what I'd find on the other side, but I needed to be prepared for anything. I knocked 3 times. I heard shuffling footsteps, and the door opened slowly. Rachel was unrecognizable. Disheveled hair, swollen eyes from crying so much, wrinkled clothes she had clearly worn for days. She looked at me, and immediately her eyes filled with tears again. "Mom," was all she managed to say, before collapsing right there at the room door. I went in and closed the door behind me. The room was small, messy, with papers scattered everywhere. I immediately recognized they were the documents I had given her, the agreement Dr. Rassan had prepared, and also all those old papers about Andrew. She had spent days reading and rereading everything, processing, trying to understand. Rachel sat on the edge of the bed, her body curved as if carrying the weight of the world. "I read everything, Mom. Everything. Every receipt, every proof, every letter. I read about Dad, about the debts, about you working 2 jobs. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "And I realized that I spent my whole life fighting the wrong person, the person who actually saved me." Those words echoed in the silent room. The total humiliation she wanted to impose on me had turned against herself, but this time it was deserved humiliation, born from truth. "I was an ungrateful daughter," she continued, her voice choked. "Worse than that, I was a criminal. I stole from you, lied about you, tried to destroy you. And why? Because I couldn't accept that my life wasn't perfect, that my marriage was bad, that my choices had been wrong. So I blamed you. Because it was easier than looking in the mirror and admitting I had failed." She picked up one of the papers from the bed, the note Andrew had written. "Dad said in this note that you were stronger than he ever was. And he was right. You were strong when he was weak. You stayed when he ran. You fought when he gave up. And I never saw that. Or rather, I saw but chose to ignore it because it didn't fit the narrative I had created." It was the first time I saw Rachel taking real responsibility, without deflections, without excuses. This real story was showing a glimpse of growth, but it was still too early to know if it was genuine. Rachel stood up and went to the desk where the agreement prepared by Dr. Rassan was. She picked up the pen that was beside it. "I'm going to sign, Mom. I'm going to sign, and I'm going to fulfill every condition, every single one." She looked at me with red but determined eyes. "I already called Bank of America. I'm going there first thing tomorrow morning to transfer all debts to my name. I already scheduled with the courthouse to rectify the fraudulent powers of attorney. And I already started writing the apology letter." She picked up some sheets with shaky handwriting, clearly written through tears. "It's not ready yet, because it's hard to put into words the dimension of what I did, but I'll finish it. And I'll read it to you, every word, even if it destroys me to do it." I saw determination there, but also fear. Fear that even doing everything right, it would still be too late. And maybe it was. "About the money," she continued, sitting back on the bed. "I sold the car. I sold my jewelry. I put the Charlotte house up for sale. I already managed to gather $83,000. She showed me a bank statement. "I know it's far from the $890,000 I need to pay, but it's a start. And I'm going to work, Mom. I already sent resumes to 47 different positions. I don't care what it is, waitress, cashier, cleaning lady. I'll do whatever's necessary." There was something different about her. She wasn't that arrogant woman who had entered the Asheville house anymore. She was someone who had finally hit rock bottom and was trying to find strength to climb up. "And about therapy," she pulled out a business card. "I already scheduled with psychologist Dr. Sarah Chen for next week, twice a week. She said I need to work not just on what I did, but why I did it. I need to understand my destructive patterns before they completely destroy me." I stayed silent, just observing. Rachel signed the agreement with firm hands, each signature a declaration that she was taking responsibility. When she finished, she stood up and came in my direction. She stopped a meter away, as if afraid to come closer. "Mom, I'm not asking for forgiveness yet, because I know I don't deserve it. Not after everything I did." Tears fell again. "I'm not asking you to love me again, or to trust me, or for our relationship to go back to what it was, because honestly, it was never good, and it was my fault." She wiped her tears. "I'm just asking for the chance to do what's right, to return what I stole, to clean up the mess I created. And maybe, who knows someday, when you look at me, you won't just feel disappointment and pain, but maybe a little bit of pride because I finally learned to be the woman you always tried to teach me to be. That ungrateful daughter was finally starting to understand the value of things she had lost. I took a step toward her, not to hug, not to comfort, just so she could see me well, hear me clearly. Rachel, I don't know if I'll be able to forgive you completely. You hurt me in ways I didn't even know were possible. You broke something inside me that might never be fixed. I saw the pain in those words hitting her, but I continued. But I recognize when someone's really trying to change. And you seem different. I don't know if it's permanent. I don't know if it'll last, but it's a start. I picked up the signed agreement from the table. I'm going to keep this, and I'm going to follow every step you take. If you fulfill everything, every condition, every payment, every therapy session, then maybe, just maybe, we can build something new. Not what we had before, because that died, but something different, something more honest. This elderly mother was learning that new beginnings are possible, but come with a high price, the death of what was before. Rachel nodded, wiping her face. Thank you, Mom, for not turning me into the police, for giving me this chance. I know I don't deserve it, but I swear I'll make it worthwhile. She picked up a backpack from the corner of the room. I'm going to Cincinnati tomorrow. I have a friend from college there who offered a place to stay until I stabilize. I'm going to start from zero, Mom, from absolute zero. And maybe that's exactly what I need. I looked at that woman, my daughter, and for the first time in years, I saw not the person she pretended to be, but who she really was. Someone broken trying to put herself together. Someone lost trying to find the way. And I, despite all the pain, all the anger, still secretly hoped she'd succeed. Because in the end, no matter how much she hurt me, she was still my daughter. And this emotional story showed that a mother's love, however wounded, still finds ways to exist, even if transformed, even if painful. The 2 years that followed were transformative in ways I never imagined possible. It wasn't easy, it wasn't linear, but it was real. Khalil and I moved to Seattle shortly after that meeting with Rachel. We needed a fresh start, a new place where we could build something true, without the shadows of the past haunting us at every corner. He expanded the family hotel chain to the West Coast, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't just someone's wife. I was a partner. I was an active part of decisions, strategies, business. Khalil kept his promise to rebuild our relationship with honesty. It wasn't a fairy tale where everything gets resolved with an apology, but it was daily work of choosing to be present, be honest, be a real partner. And slowly, that marriage that started as convenience was transforming into something solid, real. This real story showed us that sometimes the best relationships aren't the ones that start perfect, but the ones built with truth. Seattle was different from everything I knew. The constant rain, the mixture of modernity and nature, the coffee culture that permeated every corner. I felt alive in a new way. I started doing therapy too, because I realized that carrying so many years of pain and secrets had left deep marks. Dr. Lisa Patterson, my therapist, helped me understand that protecting the people I love at the cost of my own mental health wasn't love. It was self-destruction. I learned to establish boundaries, to say no, to not feel guilty about prioritizing my well-being. And gradually, that elderly mother who always put everyone first started to understand that taking care of herself wasn't selfishness, it was survival, and necessary, very necessary. Khalil supported me in every session, in every painful discovery, in every moment I needed to cry for the versions of myself I had to leave behind. Meanwhile, Rachel was fulfilling the agreement. Every month, religiously, she sent proof of payment. At first, they were small amounts, $2,500 here, $3,000 there, but they were consistent. She didn't miss a single payment. Dr. Rassan sent me monthly reports. Rachel was working 2 jobs in Cincinnati, one as a store manager during the day and another as a waitress at night. She had sold the Charlotte house, the car, even family jewelry she had kept. She was living austerely in a tiny apartment without luxuries, without comforts. And she wasn't asking for anything. No help, no relief, no compassion, just fulfilling what she promised. That ungrateful daughter was finally learning the value of hard work, sacrifice, consequences. And I, watching from afar, felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief because she was changing. Sadness for what we had to go through to get there. The psychologist's reports, Dr. Sarah Chen, also arrived monthly. Rachel was doing the internal work, confronting the destructive patterns she had inherited and cultivated. She was working through the unresolved grief over her father's death, the toxic idealization she had created, the misdirected anger she projected onto me for years. It wasn't easy. The reports made that clear. There were relapses, moments of resistance, sessions where she couldn't talk without crying. But she kept showing up, kept doing the work. And that, more than anything else, showed me this time was different. It wasn't just empty words or desperate promises. It was consistent action, difficult choices being made every day. This emotional story was showing that real change takes time, effort, and a humility few have the courage to embrace. Khalil and I had established a good routine in Seattle. We worked together during the day, expanding the business, making important decisions as partners. At night, we'd come home and cook together, something we discovered was therapeutic. He taught me Lebanese recipes he learned from his mother, and I taught Southern American dishes my grandmother used to make. We didn't talk much about Rachel during those hours. It was our time, our space to just be. But she was always there, in the back of my mind, a constant presence even at a distance. I checked payment receipts, read reports, followed every step. Not because I didn't trust, but because I needed to see. I needed confirmation that she really was changing. And month after month, the evidence was there, concrete and irrefutable. By the end of the first year, Rachel had managed to pay almost $290,000. It was impressive, considering she was starting from zero. Without anyone's help, she had sold everything of value she had, worked more than 70 hours a week, lived on the absolute bare minimum necessary. Khalil commented one night, while we reviewed the numbers, "She's doing exactly what you did for her when Andrew died, working to exhaustion to fix other people's messes." That got me. He was right. Rachel was finally understanding in practice what sacrifice meant, what it meant to give up comfort, sleep, peace, to do what was right. That elderly mother she despised so much was being mirrored in her own life now. And maybe, just maybe, that was the most important lesson of all. We had limited contact during that period, an occasional email, always formal, always about the agreement. August month receipt attached, confirmation of session with Dr. Chen, rectification of courthouse documents completed. Nothing personal, nothing emotional, and that's what I needed. I wasn't ready for more, wasn't ready for deep conversations or emotional reconnections. I needed distance, space, time to heal the wounds she had opened. Khalil respected that. Never pressured me to forgive faster or try to rebuild the relationship before I was ready. He understood, better than anyone, what it was like to deal with a child's betrayal. Richard had never reached out to his father after losing the case, simply disappeared, choosing pride over reconciliation. At least Rachel was trying. It was something. It wasn't much, but it was something. In the second year, things started to change subtly. Rachel got a better job, as regional manager for a restaurant chain. The salary was significantly higher, and monthly payments increased to $8,000, sometimes $10,000. She was rebuilding herself financially, but the psychologist's reports showed the emotional work continued intense. She was now working on deeper issues, the fear of abandonment her father's death had created, the constant need for approval, the tendency to blame others for her own failures. It was painful to read those reports, see my daughter being emotionally dissected, but it was also necessary, because without understanding the roots of behaviors, change would only be superficial, and I had lived long enough to know that superficial changes don't last. This emotional story required real transformation, the kind that hurts, that tears pieces out of you, but also rebuilds you stronger. Khalil and I were thriving. The hotel chain grew. We opened 3 new establishments in Seattle and surroundings. I had become not just a partner on paper, but an active, respected, heard voice. I discovered I had talent for management, for dealing with people, for solving complex problems. Everything I learned working 2 jobs, managing crises alone, surviving decades of difficulties, all of that had prepared me for this moment. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. I was building something mine, something no one could take away. I was no longer that dependent, fragile, invisible elderly mother. I was a businesswoman, an entrepreneur, an equal partner, and that gave me satisfaction I'd never known before. Satisfaction that didn't depend on external validation or silent sacrifices. It was mine, completely mine. As the second year approached its end, I realized something inside me had changed regarding Rachel. It wasn't complete forgiveness, not yet, but it was something like acceptance. Acceptance that she had erred gravely, but was trying to fix it. Acceptance that our relationship would never be what it was, but maybe could be something new, something more honest, more balanced, healthier. Dr. Patterson told me in a session, "Helen, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering, without the memory destroying you. It means acknowledging the other's error, without letting it define who you are." And that resonated deeply. I was learning to remember without being consumed by pain, to acknowledge what Rachel did, without letting that define my identity. It was a slow process, sometimes painful, but it was happening. And maybe, just maybe, there was hope for both of us. A different hope, realistic, but real. And sometimes, realistic is the best kind of hope there is. It was on a quiet Saturday afternoon, 2 years and a week after that confrontation in Asheville, that my phone rang with a video call notification. The name on the screen made me pause. Rachel Turner Miller. It had been months since we'd had any contact beyond formal emails with receipts and reports. My heart accelerated, that mixture of anxiety and hope that had become familiar whenever I thought about her. Khalil was next to me on the sofa, reading financial reports. He looked at the screen, and then at me. "Do you want to answer?" I took a deep breath. "I think so. I think I need to." I pressed the green button and the image loaded. What I saw surprised me completely. Rachel was different. Her hair was shorter, more natural, without those expensive highlights she always got. Her face was thinner, but there was something in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. Peace, or at least the beginning of it. "Hi, Mom," she said, her voice soft but firm. It didn't have that tone of desperation or pleading it used to have. It was just genuine. "Hi, Rachel." I didn't know what else to say. 2 years had passed, 2 years of emotional silence, safe distance. And now we were there, face to face through a screen, 2 strangers who once were mother and daughter trying to figure out what remained. I wanted to show you something," she continued, adjusting the camera. That's when I saw she wasn't alone. Next to her, sitting on the sofa, was a girl about 8 years old, with big, curious eyes. My heart almost stopped. "Mom, this is Eleanor, my daughter, your granddaughter." Eleanor. I had a granddaughter. And I didn't know. During all that time, during all that war, there was a child I didn't even know existed. That ungrateful daughter had hidden this from me too. Rachel must have seen the confusion on my face. "I know you didn't know about her. David wouldn't let me tell you. He was afraid you'd interfere in our life. One more of the many things he controlled, and I let happen." She put her hand on Eleanor's shoulder. "But now she knows everything. About what I did, about the mistakes I made. And she wanted to meet her grandmother." Eleanor waved shyly. "Hi, Grandma." That word, grandma, hit me like a punch in the stomach. Tears came instantly. I had a granddaughter, a beautiful girl I should have known years ago, who should have been part of my life, but who was kept away by pure cruelty and control. Another layer of pain, another loss I didn't even know I had suffered. This real story kept surprising me, hurting me, transforming me. "Eleanor, sweetheart, it's a pleasure to meet you," I managed to say, wiping the tears that wouldn't stop falling. "You're beautiful." She smiled, and in that smile I saw traces of little Rachel before everything collapsed, before bitterness and anger took over. "Mommy said you're very strong, that you worked hard to take care of her when she was little." Eleanor spoke with an innocence that broke my heart. "She said she wants to be strong like you when she grows up." I looked at Rachel, who had teary eyes too. She had told her daughter, had been honest about her failures, about my sacrifices. That was new, very new. The Rachel I knew would never admit her weaknesses to anyone, much less her own daughter. But this woman on the screen seemed different, transformed, as if the 2 years hadn't just passed on the calendar, but inside her too. "Mom, the reason for the call," Rachel continued, asking Eleanor's permission, who went off-screen to play in another room, is that today I made the last payment. She raised a paper to the camera. It was a bank receipt, transfer of $47,382, the exact amount that was left to complete the $890,000. It's paid, Mom. Every penny, every interest, every fine, everything I stole from you, everything I destroyed, is returned. Her voice trembled a bit, but stayed firm. And I'm not calling expecting instant forgiveness, or expecting that now we'll go back to being mother and daughter, as if nothing happened. I know that might never happen, and that's okay. I accept it. She paused, breathing deeply. I just wanted you to know I fulfilled my part, and that I'm trying to be the woman you deserved from the beginning. Khalil put his hand on my shoulder, giving me strength. I looked at that woman on the screen, my daughter, and saw not the person who hurt me, but someone who had fallen to rock bottom and was slowly climbing back up. She wasn't the Rachel from before. That one had died in Asheville. This was someone else, shaped by pain, remorse, the hard work of rebuilding herself. Rachel, I began, my voice coming out firmer than expected. I received all the receipts. I read all Dr. Chen's reports. I saw every step you took these 2 years. And I'm going to be honest with you. It still hurts. I still remember everything you did, how you hurt me, how you tried to destroy me. I saw her lower her head, accepting that. But, I continued, I also recognize real effort when I see it. You didn't ask for shortcuts, didn't try to play victim, didn't give up when it got hard. You just did what was right, month after month without failing once. Broken trust doesn't rebuild overnight, Rachel, I said, and she nodded, understanding. It'll take time, a lot of time. And it might be that we never get back what other mothers and daughters have. It might be we build something completely different, something that doesn't even have a name yet. I wiped the tears that insisted on falling, but I'm willing to try, slowly, with boundaries, with honesty, if you're willing to. I saw her face light up with cautious hope. I am, Mom, completely willing, in whatever time you need, whatever way you want. I looked at Khalil, who smiled encouragingly, then looked back at the screen. And Eleanor, I'd like to meet my granddaughter in person, when you feel comfortable. No rush, but I'd like to. That elderly mother was finally allowing herself to have hope again. Cautious hope, realistic, but hope. Rachel called Eleanor back, and the girl appeared with a drawing in her hands. I made this for you, Grandma, she said, showing it to the camera. It was a drawing of 3 women holding hands, one tall, one medium, one small. Underneath was written in childish letters, family. My heart broke and rebuilt at the same time. It's beautiful, Eleanor, very beautiful. The girl smiled, proud. Mommy said that one day we're going to visit you in Seattle and you're going to take me to see the fish market. Is it true? I laughed through tears. It's true. When your mommy is ready, you'll come visit us. There's lots of cool stuff here. Eleanor celebrated, and Rachel hugged her with such pure love, I almost didn't recognize it. That ungrateful daughter had become a present, loving mother, honest with her own daughter in ways she never was with me. And maybe that was the greatest proof of change of all. Mom, before hanging up, there's something I need to say. Rachel spoke, her voice serious. Thank you. Thank you for not having given up on me completely, for having given me this chance when I didn't deserve it. You could have put me in jail and you'd be within your rights, but you chose to give me an opportunity to be better. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to honor that. She wiped her tears. Not as a heavy obligation, but as a gift, because you gave me something I'd never had, the chance to really grow, to become someone better. And for that, for all of that, thank you. I couldn't respond immediately. The words were stuck in my throat, mixed with so many emotions I couldn't even name them all. Finally, I managed to whisper, "You're becoming the woman I always knew you could be, Rachel. And that makes me prouder than you imagine." We said goodbye with promises to keep in touch, to go slowly, to build something new and healthy. When the call ended, I sat staring at the black screen for a long time. Khalil hugged me, letting me process everything in silence. "You did the right thing," he said quietly. "You gave her a chance, but also protected yourself. You kept your boundaries, your dignity. That's strength, Helen. Real strength." And he was right. I had learned that forgiving didn't mean forgetting or going back to how it was before. It meant acknowledging the error, demanding real change, And then, when that change proved genuine, opening a door. Not the wide door that existed before, but a new door with locks and keys that could be closed any time if necessary. But a door, a possibility, a fragile but real hope. This emotional story didn't have a fairy tale ending. There were no dramatic hugs or grandiose declarations of eternal love. But it had something better. It had truth. It had two women who deeply hurt each other, learning to exist in the same world again, with respect, with boundaries, with honesty. Rachel was no longer that ungrateful daughter who accused me of crimes I didn't commit, and I was no longer that elderly mother who let herself be trampled in the name of maternal love. We were two different people, transformed by pain, shaped by consequences, trying to build something new from the ashes of what was destroyed. And maybe, just maybe, that was more valuable than any perfect relationship that never really existed, because it was real, painfully, wonderfully real. And we were both now stronger women, less fragile, more true. And that, in the end, was all that mattered. In the end, this story isn't just about a mother and daughter. It's about all of us who've carried burdens alone, who've been unjustly accused, who've sacrificed in silence while others reaped the fruits. It's about learning that forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, and that rebuilding doesn't mean going back to what it was. Sometimes, the most broken relationships are the ones that teach us the most important lessons, that we have the right to defend ourselves, to demand respect, to choose our own dignity above everything. Rachel and I will never again be mother and daughter in the traditional way. But we're building something new, something honest, something that hurts less and sustains more. And maybe that's exactly what we needed from the beginning. Truth, even if painful. And you, have you been through something similar? Have you had to confront someone you loved because of lies or betrayals? Have you needed to choose between forgiving and protecting yourself? What would you do if you were in my place? Leave it here in the comments, because these stories connect us, make us realize we're not alone in these silent battles we face. If this story touched your heart, if you felt every word as if you were living alongside me, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss other emotional stories that bring life lessons and make us reflect on our own choices and relationships. Because sometimes hearing someone else's story is what gives us strength to write our own. Bye, and see you in the next story.